New York has to be one of the most famous American states and is a hotspot for both foreign and domestic tourists. The geography of the Empire State is incredibly varied, from the bustling streets of New York City to the natural beauty of the Adirondack Mountains. New York gained statehood in 1788, becoming the 11th state on July 26th. In this video, we will take a closer look at 6 events that happened in New York State that had a cultural impact on the region, America, and beyond. Number 1. The Dutch colony of New Netherland. The first European colony in the area that would become New York State was Dutch. The Netherlands gained dominance in the area after English explorer Henry Hudson charted the Mahicanuk River, dubbed the Nord River by the Dutch and now known as the Hudson, for the Dutch East India Company in 1609. Hudson claimed the area for the Dutch Republic, and it was named New Netherland in 1614. The first colonists arrived in 1624 and settled at a small trading post at Fort Orange in modern-day Albany. Soon, they established a second stronghold on the southern tip of Manhattan Island, which they called Fort Amsterdam. It wasn't long before New Amsterdam became the center of the New Netherland government. In the mid-1600s, a dispute led to the further development of New York's future capital of Albany. The disagreement was between Peter Stuyvesant, the Director General of the New Netherland colony, and Kilian van Rensselaer. The first patroon of Rensselaerwyck, Van Rensselaer, believed that Fort Orange was under his jurisdiction, but the colony director saw the patroon as a threat to the fur trading posts. This dispute led to Stuyvesant establishing the Court of Justice for the village of Beverwyck in 1652, and the first municipal government for the future capital of Albany was created. Although the colonies were initially intended to be trading outposts alone, Dutch Europeans were attracted to the area due to descriptions that the land was temperate and fertile with plenty of natural resources. Soon, Dutch farmers transformed the landscape, bringing European farming techniques and blending them with native methods of growing beans, pumpkins, and maize. The Dutch colony was inherently multicultural and attracted immigrants from across Europe. By the time the English sailed their warships into the harbor of New Amsterdam, the Dutch had already established a diverse culture that can still be seen in New York today. Number 2. The Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois Confederacy formed around the end of the 16th century and originally consisted of 5 Native American tribes from upper New York State. The Confederacy was conceived by Dekanawida, the Peacemaker, a Huron who is said to have convinced Hiawatha, an Onondaga living with Mohawks, to create a confederacy based on peace, civil authority, righteousness, and the Great Law. The tribes were united by their desire to stand together against their enemies and aspects of the European invasion, and they created a common council made up of clan and village chiefs. Each tribe had one vote, and any decision had to have unanimous backing to be passed. The original 5 nations were the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, with the Tuscarora joining in 1722. The Iroquois Confederacy, also known as Haudenosaunee, Iroquois League, 5 Nations, and later 6 Nations, was well organized, consciously defined, and very effective. They used ritualized systems for important decisions, such as choosing leaders, and they insisted that any colonial government conduct joint negotiations in the same way. The Iroquois Confederacy began dispersing tribes in that area, and between 1648 and 1656, they had scattered the Huron, Tianantati, Neutral, and Erie tribes. The Iroquois Confederacy played a significant role in the French-British rivalry, as the French were the allies of the Iroquois' enemies, the Algonquins and Hurons. After they had destroyed the Huron Confederacy by 1650, they began launching attacks on New France and kept the route from Albany to the Great Lakes free of French settlements. In contrast, they came to rely on trade with the British in Albany for European goods, supporting the English settlers there. The Iroquois Confederacy won the admiration of prominent European Americans, such as Benjamin Franklin, and scholars still hotly debate its influence on the American political system. Number 3. The American Revolution. New York State played a vital role in the Revolutionary War. As Britain's center of commerce in America, it was strategically important as a base of operations, which meant it was an obvious target for the American revolutionaries. Upper New York State became a battleground and played host to several pivotal events. In 1777, Britain launched the largest conflict of the war when British forces attempted to capture the Hudson Valley and cut off New England from its other colonies. While their initial plan was to create a pincer movement with a contingent from Lake Ontario meeting with another invasion force at Albany that came via the Champlain Valley, the troops from Lake Ontario were forced to retreat to Quebec. The Battle of Saratoga in 1777 is often given as a turning point in the war, as the decisive American victory boosted the morale of the revolutionaries and convinced France to support their war effort against the British. The French began providing crucial military and financial aid to the Americans. Meanwhile, in Upper New York, Major General John Sullivan wanted to target the Native American allies of the British. He laid waste to Native American villages in central and western New York, causing them to retreat to British-held positions around Fort Niagara. Nearly a third of all battles in the Revolutionary War were fought in New York, and after the Constitution was ratified in 1788, New York City became the first capital of the United States. Number 4. The Erie Canal. The Erie Canal was the first in the United States to connect the Atlantic Ocean to Western waterways. Construction began in 1817, and its success would cement New York City as a major commercial center. The inspiration for the canal came from efforts to help improve navigation on the Mohawk River, as it was the best course from the Atlantic to the Great Lakes. Rather than make improvements to the river itself, New York Mayor DeWitt Clinton proposed the idea of a Western Canal in 1811. The concept was drawn up by a flour merchant, Jesse Hawley, who compiled a series of essays on the subject while in debtor's prison. Although the federal government declared the project was too ambitious, dubbing it Clinton's folly, the state of New York concluded that it was worth undertaking and decided to carve out the 363 miles of canal with nothing more than horses and manpower. In 1816, Clinton had won legislative approval and was named project commissioner. The following year, Clinton secured $7 million in loans for a canal stretching from Buffalo to the Upper Hudson. Building the canal faced greater problems than simply digging out the channel, as the builders had to overcome the requirement to move boats through more than 500 feet of elevation. To combat the problem, Clinton turned to engineer Benjamin Wright, who had amassed a corps of self-taught engineers due to the lack of engineering schools in the U.S. at the time. The project actually prompted the founding of engineering programs in several schools. To combat the uneven terrain, the Erie Canal required the construction of 83 locks and 18 aqueducts. The construction was a feat of modern engineering and yielded new discoveries, such as Canvas White's creation of cement that hardened underwater. Multiple contractors were responsible for small sections of the Erie Canal, providing their own labor and equipment to build it. The canal was finished a full 2 years ahead of schedule. In October 1825, Clinton and other dignitaries boarded a boat in Buffalo. They traveled to New York City, where Clinton ceremoniously married the waters by emptying a keg of water from Lake Erie into the Atlantic. Far from being a folly, the canal was an instant success. The cost of transporting goods from Buffalo to New York City was cut from $100 per ton to less than $10 per ton. Trade boomed, and more settlers began moving to upstate New York due to more accessible markets. New York City now had more access to Western territories and saw a huge increase in trade, setting it on the path to become the commercial center it is today. Number 5. The Harlem Renaissance. New York City, specifically Harlem, was the epicenter for a revival of Black heritage and an explosion of African American culture. The Harlem Renaissance was brought about by the Great Migration, which began around 1916. Due to harsh segregation laws in the South, many Black families moved from the rural South and headed for the cities in the North, hoping for greater economic opportunities. In 1914, the First World War stopped the steady flow of European industrial workers, so more job opportunities were opening up, which were advertised to Black Americans living in the South. By 1919, scholars estimate that around 1 million Black Americans had left the South and relocated to the North. In New York City, the Black population increased by 66%. The move from rural to urban areas caused literacy to increase in the Black community and created a melting pot of Pan-African culture and ideas. There was a renewed sense of pride in African culture, which manifested through music, dance, art, literature, and theater. It was a golden age for African American artists, giving Black Americans pride and control over how they were represented in American culture. Although the Harlem Renaissance did not achieve the socio-political transformation many of its proponents hoped it would, it was a huge turning point in African American cultural history. The movement helped establish black writers, artists, and musicians as authorities over their own cultural identity. Number 6. The 9/11 terrorist attacks. In 2001, an extremist group called Al-Qaeda hijacked several passenger airplanes and used them to commit attacks against the U.S. The deadliest of these attacks occurred in New York City, where nearly 3,000 people were killed. The attacks had a profound impact on New York, America as a whole, and even the world. The World Trade Center was a part of the famous skyline of one of the largest cities in the world. The attack's impact was instantaneous, with many New Yorkers recording the events as they unfolded. Millions more watched the tragedy live on television. But it wasn't just people who were shaken by the attacks. The towers were at the heart of the financial district, meaning the world's markets were severely affected. The damage to Lower Manhattan's infrastructure and the possibility of stock market panic meant the New York markets were closed for 4 trading days. Commercial aviation took a hit, and tens of thousands of people were stranded throughout the U.S. as airspace closed, reopening only with stricter security measures several days later. Perhaps the biggest impact of the attacks was the surge in support for war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Over 20 years later, the impact of the attacks on the Twin Towers is still felt. In 2016, 76% of adult Americans named the September 11 attacks as one of the 10 historical events of their lifetime. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the history of New York, check out our book, New York State and New York City History, a captivating guide to pioneering moments, cultural milestones, and the stories that forged an iconic metropolis. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.